All right, let's dive into this, huh? The Erie Canal. Fascinating, really. You sent over some incredible research on it. And honestly, the more I dig into this so-called ditch, the more I'm convinced it's anything but simple.
You're absolutely right. The Erie Canal story, it's way more complex and impactful than most people realize. It's not just about, mules pulling barges. It's a story about ambition, bold innovation, and really the sheer audacity to connect an entire nation through this waterway.
Okay, so let's start with that word ditch. I mean, why was this incredible project, this game changer for America, initially dubbed Clinton's Ditch? What's the story there?
Well, you really have to consider the historical context. Back in those early 1800s, America was still finding its feet, a young nation. So the idea of building a 363-mile canal across this really rugged terrain of New York State, it seemed pretty outlandish, maybe even impossible to a lot of people.
Right, and so then enter DeWitt Clinton, the governor of New York, with this vision, this almost impossibly bold vision for this project. Was he always a champion of this idea, or did he sort of come around to it? What was his journey there?
Actually, Clinton was a really staunch advocate for the canal right from the very start. He saw the potential, the potential to transform New York, make it this global economic powerhouse, connecting New York City's bustling port to all the resources and markets out in the Midwest.
I see how that vision would really appeal to those New York City merchants.
Yeah.
But was everyone on board? It sounds like there was quite a bit of skepticism, maybe even some outright opposition to this massive project, right?
Oh, absolutely. You have to remember, this was an enormous undertaking, and it required a huge investment of public funds. A lot of folks, especially those down in downstate New York, saw it as this risky gamble, maybe even a boondoggle, something that would only benefit those upstate farmers and traders at the expense of everyone else.
So how did Clinton manage to overcome that opposition and get this thing off the ground? It must have taken some serious persuasion, some real political maneuvering.
Oh, it did. Clinton, he was a master strategist, incredibly skilled at navigating that complex political landscape. He really rallied support from all the key players, emphasizing how the economic benefits would flow to all the different regions of the state. And he also tapped into this growing sense of national pride, positioning the canal as the symbol of American ingenuity and progress, which I think really helped.
It's amazing, really, to think about this project starting out as Clinton's ditch, this object of mockery, and ending up reshaping the whole economic and geographic landscape of America.
Hmm.
Speaking of geography, let's talk about the route itself.
Yeah.
Why was the Erie Canal built where it was? Was it simply a matter of convenience, or was there a more strategic reason behind choosing that particular path?
Well, the canals route, it was pretty genius, really. They utilized a natural corridor that had been used by Native Americans for centuries, the Mohawk River Valley. This valley, it offered a relatively flat passage through the Appalachian Mountains, which, as you can imagine, were a pretty formidable barrier to westward expansion back then.
So the canal wasn't just about creating a waterway. It was about conquering this geographic obstacle that had held back American progress for so long, really changing the game.
Exactly. And that's what makes the engineering behind the Erie Canal all the more remarkable. I mean, this was the early 1800s. America back then didn't have this huge pool of experienced engineers, particularly those with, expertise in building canals.
Right. So who did they turn to build this engineering marvel? Did they bring in experts from Europe, or did they have to find that talent closer to home? What's the story there?
Well, there's a really fascinating story there. The real heroes of the canal's construction, they were Benjamin Wright and James Geddes. These two guys really embodied that classic American spirit of ingenuity and resourcefulness. And the surprising thing is their backgrounds weren't in engineering at all. They were actually, believe it or not, lawyers.
Lawyers turned canal builders.
Yeah.
Wow, that's not exactly the career path you'd expect.
Yeah.
It sounds like they had to do a lot of on-the-job learning, facing some pretty steep learning curves along the way.
They definitely did. They were pioneers in every sense of the word, tackling these engineering challenges that no one in America had ever really faced before, figuring out how to build these complex locks, design those aqueducts, create a system that could maintain a consistent water level all across hundreds of miles. A massive undertaking.
Speaking of locks, I read about this guy, Canvas White, this young apprentice who was sent on this secret mission to England to learn all about lock technology. Sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It really does. It just goes to show how determined Clinton and his team were to make this project a success. They were willing to go to extraordinary lengths, sending this young man on this risky journey across the Atlantic, all to acquire the knowledge they needed. Really remarkable.
And it wasn't just lock technology, right? They had to figure out, I think I read, even invent a new type of cement here in America. What was so special about this hydraulic cement?
Oh, yeah, this is where the technical details get really interesting. See, the problem was that traditional cement, it wasn't waterproof, and that obviously was a major problem for building durable canal structures. So American inventors, they had to develop this whole new type of cement that could hold up under constant exposure to water.
So they're building these locks based on, sort of stolen secrets from England. They're inventing new types of cement. They're basically, writing the textbook on canal construction as they go.
Hmm.
It's just incredible to think about the sheer amount of innovation that went into this entire project.
It really is. And what's even more amazing is that they managed to pull it all off in, a relatively short amount of time, just 8 years. And the Erie Canal was completed, completely transforming the landscape of America, ushering in this new era of economic growth and expansion. It's hard to overstate the impact.
So we've got the political vision, the strategic route, the incredible engineering ingenuity. But what about the people, the everyday folks? How did the construction of the Erie Canal impact their lives? Were they cheering from the sidelines, or were they more directly involved in this whole endeavor?
Oh, the Erie Canal, it wasn't just built by engineers and politicians. It was built by thousands of laborers, many of them immigrants who had come to America seeking a better life. And these workers, they faced really grueling conditions, toiling day and night, digging that canal by hand, often in harsh weather, dangerous terrain. It was incredibly difficult work.
It sounds like the construction of the canal was almost as much a social phenomenon as an engineering feat. Were there any lasting consequences, good or bad, for the communities that lived and worked along the canal? I imagine it had to have reshaped those places in significant ways.
There definitely were lasting consequences. The canal, it brought economic opportunity to a lot of those towns and villages that sprung up along its route, but it also had a really profound impact on the environment. And of course, the lives of many Native American communities were significantly affected as well. It wasn't all positive.
That's what's always so fascinating about history to me, It's never just a straightforward story of progress and triumph. There are always these complex consequences, unintended outcomes, and different perspectives to consider.
You're exactly right. And that's one of the things that makes the Erie Canal such a rich and compelling subject to explore. It's like this microcosm of American history, full of ambition and innovation, struggle, and ultimately a really profound impact on the nation's destiny. A fascinating story, really. Really makes you think, doesn't it? This ditch and the ripple effects it had. I mean, it wasn't just about moving goods, it was about people, ideas, even social movements.
You've definitely got me curious. Tell me more about those social changes. I have to admit, I usually think about the canal and, mainly economic growth, not so much cultural upheaval.
Well, picture it like this. The canal was like this giant mixing bowl bringing together all kinds of people, farmers, merchants, immigrants, you name it. And that mix, it created this environment where new ideas could really flourish and spread quickly.
So more than a trade route, a cultural exchange route, too.
Yeah.
Got it. What kind of cultural changes are we talking about specifically? I just imagine all sorts of interesting uh, characters and movements popping up along those canal banks.
Oh, you're not far off. Take the free love movement, for example. These were social reformers who really challenged traditional ideas about marriage and relationships. They really found a home along the canal, spreading their message of free unions and individual autonomy.
Free love communes along the Erie Canal. Now, that's not something you learn about in your typical history book. Sounds like the canal really pushed those social boundaries.
It did. And it wasn't just about, romantic relationships. The canal also played a role in the birth of new religious movements, for example, the Mormon faith. It was actually founded in a small town very close to the canal.
I've heard of the Mormons, of course, but I never knew their roots were tied to the Erie Canal. What was it about the canal that fostered that kind of religious innovation? Was it the mix of cultures, or maybe the sense of new beginnings, or was it something else entirely?
Well, I think it was a combination of things, really. The canal, like I said, it attracted a diverse population, which led to this melting pot of different religious beliefs and practices. It also nurtured a sense of individualism and a willingness to question traditional authority, which really created the space for those new religious ideas to take root.
That makes sense. So the canal was this unexpected incubator for social and religious change. But it wasn't all about new beginnings, right? I mean, the canal also played a role in some of the darker parts of American history, especially when it comes to slavery.
That's true. The Erie Canal became a really crucial route on the Underground Railroad, offering a path to freedom for enslaved people escaping from the South.
It's incredible to think about this ditch being used as a lifeline for freedom seekers. How did that even work? Did the canal's infrastructure or the traffic on it, did that help facilitate those escapes? Were there particular communities or individuals along the route who were really instrumental in that?
There were. You see, the network of towns and villages along the canal, they provided safe havens for people escaping slavery. And there were sympathetic canal workers, boat captains, just ordinary citizens, really, who risked their own lives to help those freedom seekers reach safety in the north. A lot of bravery and compassion.
So Clinton's ditch, it was more than just an economic engine. It was a force for social change, some progressive, and in the case of the Underground Railroad, deeply moral. It's incredible how this one infrastructure project had such a profound impact on so many different aspects of American life.
It really is. And it reminds us that infrastructure isn't just about, bricks and mortar, or in this case, water and towpaths. It's about connecting people, connecting ideas, connecting hopes and dreams.
Speaking of connections, I keep thinking back to that image of DeWitt Clinton carrying those barrels of Lake Erie water all the way to New York Harbor to mark the canal's completion. Sounds like quite a spectacle.
It was a symbolic act, no doubt, meant to really highlight the canal's power to unite the nation. By pouring that fresh water into the salty Atlantic, Clinton was basically declaring that the American interior was now seamlessly connected to the global marketplace. A powerful statement.
I bet that was quite a sight. So we've covered the social and cultural impact, but let's shift gears and talk about the canal's role in the Industrial Revolution. I know it was key for transporting all those raw materials and finished goods, but I'm curious about its more direct connection to the rise of factories and, mass production.
Well, this is where the story takes another interesting turn. The Erie Canal, it wasn't just a transportation route, it was actually a source of power for the growing industrial economy.
Wait, hold on. You mean they were actually using the canal water itself to power those factories? I thought those early factories relied mainly on, coal or steam engines.
While coal and steam were certainly important, the canal's flowing water, it provided this readily available and renewable source of energy. They built mills and factories right along the canal, using water wheels and turbines to harness its power directly.
So the canal wasn't just moving goods, it was powering the very machines that produced those goods.
Hmm.
Pretty ingenious. Are there any particularly interesting examples of this canal-powered industry? I could picture some clever industrialists figuring out how to tap into this watery energy source.
There are. One that comes to mind is the story of a man named Hawley. He owned a factory near the canal, and he realized that the canal's water was this valuable asset, so he came up with this plan to harness it for his factory.
So what did he do? Build some giant water wheel? I'm picturing like a scene straight out of Charles Dickens.
Even more audacious than that, Hawley actually had them dig a series of tunnels underneath his factory. They diverted water from the canal to power his machinery. He basically created his own private hydropower system, all thanks to the Erie Canal.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like he was siphoning off energy from this giant watery battery. Starting to see why they called it Clinton's ditch, huh? More like Clinton's powerhouse.
A great analogy. And this use of water power wasn't just some isolated case. It became a really defining feature of many of those industrial towns and cities that popped up along the canal.
So the Erie Canal, it wasn't just a transportation route, it was a catalyst for industrialization, shaping the very landscape of American manufacturing. It's just incredible to think about the impact of this one project, all these different ways it changed America. It's really mind-boggling, to think that Clinton's ditch fueled an industrial revolution, pushed social change, even played a part in the fight against slavery. But here we are, 21st century.
Uh-huh.
Are we just romanticizing this old canal, or does it actually still hold some relevance today?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one a lot of people are wrestling with right now. The Erie Canal, well, it may not be hauling those grain barges like it used to, but it's definitely not some forgotten relic. It's facing a whole new set of challenges, new opportunities in this modern world.
I'm all ears. What are some of those 21st century challenges? I can only imagine that maintaining, a nearly 200-year-old canal, that can't be easy or cheap.
You're right about that. Preserving a historic infrastructure like this, it comes with a pretty hefty price tag, something like $100 million a year just to keep it operating.
Wow, that's a serious investment. So who's footing the bill, and is it worth it? What are the arguments for, putting money into this aging waterway?
Well, that's where the New York Power Authority comes in. They're the ones managing the canal now, and they've actually come up with this really innovative vision for its future. It's about more than just preserving history, it's about looking ahead.
Okay, color me intrigued. What does a 21st century vision for 19th century canal even look like?
Well, it's multifaceted, really. It's about balancing things like economic development, environmental restoration, even climate change mitigation.
The climate change part, that's especially interesting. How does a canal built back in the 1800s help us deal with, you know, the environmental challenges of today? Doesn't quite compute.
Think of it this way. The Erie Canal, it's essentially a massive water management system, right? And that means it can play a key role in things like, controlling floods, mitigating droughts, even helping restore those wetlands and natural habitats that are so crucial for a healthy ecosystem.
So instead of a relic of the past, the canal could actually be a tool for the future, a way to adapt to climate change.
Hmm.
That's pretty cool. What about the economic side? How is the New York Power Authority planning to, bring back the canal as an economic engine?
There are a lot of exciting initiatives happening right now. One focus is on, well, tourism and recreation. Imagine kayaking along those historic towpaths, exploring those charming canal towns, maybe taking a cruise on a solar-powered canal boat. A different way to experience the waterway.
I love that. A mix of history and ecotourism, a way to experience the past, but with an eye towards the future. Are they looking into other economic possibilities too?
Oh, absolutely. They're also exploring how to use the canal's water for, small-scale hydropower generation, providing clean, renewable energy to local communities, less reliance on fossil fuels.
So instead of those big polluting power plants, we could have these canal-powered microgrids, kind of like that clever industrialist Holly using the canal to power his factory way back when.
Exactly. It's all about learning from the past, adapting those old ideas to face the challenges of today.
This whole deep dive into the Erie Canal, it's been full of surprises. I started off thinking about, mules and barges, and now we're talking climate change, ecotourism, renewable energy. It really is amazing, the legacy of this ditch, a testament to, human ingenuity.
It really is. The story of the Erie Canal, it reminds us that infrastructure, it's not just about concrete and steel. It's a reflection of, our values, our dreams, our ability to innovate. And it can change over time, adapt to new realities.
So, what does all this mean for you, the listener? Well, maybe it's a nudge to look around your own community with fresh eyes. What seemingly outdated or forgotten pieces of infrastructure are out there? Could they be repurposed, reimagined, given a new life? Maybe there's a hidden gem waiting to be discovered, a piece of the past that holds the key to a better future. Who knows? Maybe you'll be inspired to start your own deep dive into history, uncovering those surprising stories that are hiding in plain sight. Thanks for joining us on this journey.